Okay, we are going to get started.
Are we doing the same, like, release a little early, but
Yep. So, you have a quiz today. It'll be good. It's now at 12 minutes and with a number of multiple choice ones. I think it's long enough. I hope. I think it's long enough. I mean, the time's long enough. The quiz, I'm sure, is long enough, right? Yeah. And it's also open a little bit longer, so you don't have to, like, race out here and push somebody out of the way for a computer. Like, get it done by tonight. I think by 6 was when I put it. I can't remember when I put these things. I'm pretty sure it's 6. Oh, it was 11? Oh, nice. That was smart of me. Get it done before midnight. Good? Yeah. So today we're on to bones and skeletal tissue. We are not going to finish all these slides today. I don't think we are. But I just have a lot in case, we're just moving through and feeling bones. So, if you're an archaeologist and you're digging through things, you can find some, pots, right? It's also fairly easy to find bones, true? Right? They last a long time. So the mental picture you have with bones, right? It's kind of like, I don't know, rocks. At least that's, for me and for a lot of people, originally, you kind of think of bones as being like these dead things, right? Like, yep, it's a bone. Almost like, yep, it's a piece of rebar. It's not, though. Bones get to be as alive as anything else in the body. Hi. Okay, so we're at here. Today we're going to go over bones in general. We're not learning the names of any specific bones yet. That's next week. Hi, everybody. Skeletal system counts for bones, cartilage, joints, and ligaments. We're going to ignore joints and ligaments until next semester. They're interesting. You don't want to break them, but yeah. But we're going to go through the parts of the skeletal system. We'll look at cartilage briefly. Cartilage is legitimately basically stiff water, which if you've ever belly flopped, water can be reasonably strong, right? Like with cartilage, a very, very wet material, but stiffened up. So it's nice and hard. The 3 types, and based on your labs, it looks like you all had this nailed down. Hyaline cartilage, super flexible. Elastic somewhat has some recoil to it, sort of stretchy. And the fibro cartilage is that really tough kind. Here are some pictures. So, conveniently color-coded for your convenience. The hyaline cartilage is all this blue stuff. You see it all over the place here. Right? You'll see it really well on the ribs. It's also the kind of cartilage, if you mess around with your nose, that's the kind of cartilage you're feeling. Right? Elastic cartilage is a few other places, like it's in your epiglottis. It's also, if you're messing with your ear, it kind of like, it bounces, right? And then the fibrocartilage, nice and tough, you'll see it in your discs here. So far so good? Okay, enough about cartilage because on to bones. Bones are the cool part, that's what we're at today. What are bones doing for us? Or for you specifically? I realize you just saw tissue, so it kind of comes up again, but how are bones helping you out? Yeah, you're like, I feel strongly about keeping my brain, safe, and bones help make that possible, right? Like, you don't want to drop bricks on your head, but, like, there is some protection there. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, you basically want the lever function, right? Like, because otherwise you push or pull and you just kind of like, think slug, right? Like, kind of mush. Nice. Anything else? Those are 2 of the really big ones. Yeah, they totally get to act as a backup storage system. The one that's really, that they're particularly concerned about is calcium, right? if you don't have calcium in your blood, like, things shut down. As in, your heart and your brain will shut down. Like, yep, that was good, we're done. So, your bones will dump calcium out as needed. And there'll also be some fat in the bones. Yeah. Those are some big ones. There are other things too while we're on there. Protecting movement, minerals and fats, and then that blood storage. Blood formation, sorry. And I have a video for you. Online people, this is a good time to watch this YouTube video.
Has been called the ultimate biomaterial.
Logan, can you hear that okay?
Light, strong,
Up, down.
capable of adapting to diverse functional demands. And if all that weren't enough, it is also able to repair itself. In large part, these impressive qualities
Okay,
can
I
be
can't hear
attributed
it.
to the structure of bone, which some have compared to the reinforced concrete used to make buildings. One of the first steps in constructing a building is putting in place a frame containing long steel rods and then pouring cement around the rods. The ultimate result, a structure that is both strong and resilient. In much the same way, the spongy, mesh-like inner layer of bones provides resiliency, while the minerals that surround it, including calcium and phosphorus, provide strength. The outer layer of bone tissue, found primarily in the shaft of long bones like the femur or tibia, is known as compact or cortical bone. It consists of closely packed osteons, which are the fundamental functional units of most compact bones. It is the close packing of osteons that gives bone the appearance of being a solid mass. Osteons are roughly cylindrical structures, typically several millimeters long and about 0.2 of a millimeter in diameter. They are sometimes referred to as Haversian systems, named for Clopton Havers, the 17th century British physician who first observed and described these canal-like structures. The osteon consists of several components, including a central canal called the osteonic or Haversian canal. Inside this canal is a layer of connective tissue called the endosteum, which contains nerve fibers and blood vessels. Still other canals in the osteon, known as Volkmann's canals or perforating canals, connect the blood supply and nerves to the periosteum, which covers the surface of bones. Found within spaces of the osteon, known as lacunae, are mature bone cells called osteocytes. They are joined together by very narrow canals known as canaliculi in order to facilitate the distribution of nutrients and the elimination of waste. Canaliculi radiate outward like the spokes of a wheel. Surrounding the Haversian canal are concentric rings or lamellae of what's known as bone matrix, a combination of calcified intercellular ingredients. These ingredients include organic matter, chiefly collagen fibers, as well as inorganic matter in the form of what's called hydroxyapatite, which consists of crystals of calcium phosphate. It is the association of hydroxyapatite with collagen fibers that is responsible for the hardness of bone. Filling the interior of the bone is trabecular bone, also known as cancellous or spongy bone. Trabecular bone is far lighter and more porous than compact bone. The difference in density is especially striking. Compact bone comprises 80% of the total bone mass of an adult skeleton, despite the fact that trabecular bone accounts for far more surface area. Trabecular bone does not contain osteons, is usually found at the end of long bones, and is normally surrounded by cortical bone. Trabecular bone is composed of a lattice or network of branching bone spicules or trabeculae. The trabeculae are not penetrated by blood vessels, instead receiving their nutrition via diffusion from the endosteum lining the bone marrow spaces between the trabeculae. While the arrangement of the trabeculae may appear to be random, it is not. The thickest and strongest trabeculae are arranged in the direction subjected to the greatest stress. It should be noted that bone tissue is formed and dissolved, a process known as remodeling or renewal, on a continuing basis. There are three types of cells found only in bone that play important roles in this process. Osteoclasts are large cells that dissolve bone by hollowing out a channel in the bone, a process known as resorption. Layers of bone-forming cells, known as osteoblasts, follow, laying down new bone along the sides of the channel. Finally, there are the osteocytes, which come from osteoblasts. Their job is to sense pressures or cracks in the bone and to help direct where osteoblasts will carry out the process of resorption. Ultimately, it is the balance between osteoclasts and osteoblasts that maintains bone tissue and makes bone homeostasis possible.
Is it okay? Honestly, if you get that, that's kind of like all we need to know from today. But I feel a deep need to go over every single thing the video just talked about. But the Ernest narrator's point that it is an impressive biomaterial is a really, really good point. This stuff is strong, it's tough, it can handle pressures lots of different ways, and it's constantly changing. Did anybody last year during student performance days go to the lecture about walking weapons and waddling, whatever it's called? Yeah, it's kind of cool, right? That bones get remodeled in response to what stresses you have. Absolutely true. I have another YouTube video for you because I like watching them. Basically, I like watching the osteoclasts nom on things, so we're gonna watch those. Again, online people, the link is in your notes. This one's way shorter.
Bone is a dynamic tissue that is continually being built, broken down, and rebuilt in a process called bone remodeling. Bone tissue is broken down and resorbed by multinucleated cells known as osteoclasts. These cells are derived from monocytes, which originate within bone marrow. Osteoclasts play an important role in liberating minerals and other molecules stored within the bone matrix. Bone tissue serves as a repository for vital minerals, including calcium phosphate and various biologically active molecules, such as growth factors. The release of calcium from the bone can play a role in maintaining its homeostasis within the body. The cells responsible for building new bone tissue are known as osteoblasts. Osteoblasts are thought to be derived from cells found to be associated with blood vessels. Once active, they start to produce the organic component of bone, osteum, which is predominantly made of collagen. Minerals start to crystallize around the collagen scaffold to form hydroxyapatite, the major inorganic constituent of bone, which contains calcium phosphate. Bone mineral density, or BMD, can be used to estimate the strength of bone and to assess the risk of fracture. As osteoblasts form new bone tissue, many become embedded within the matrix and differentiate into osteocytes. The structure, composition, and cellular processes that occur within bone allow it to simultaneously serve as a calcium reservoir, while providing structural support to the vital organs and for locomotion.
Okay. We're good? So those are types of bones. The osteocytes, those mature bone cells, the one that was getting encased, right? Like, oh no, it's okay. It's supposed to be like that. It's gonna help sense things. It's gonna do cellular functions. Osteoblasts, laying down that collagen-like stuff, laying down osteoid, right? Rebuilding the bone. Osteoclasts, um, they're big and they go and they break down bone. So you need all of these, right? So like, I want to be strong. I mean, I don't want to be strong enough that I like do tons of exercise, but theoretically, I want to be strong, right? Would it be a good idea for me just to, somehow take some medicine or do something that shuts down my osteoclasts? Be like, I want large bones. We're gonna encourage the osteoblasts. Fine, you can keep around the osteocytes, but those osteoclasts, they break stuff down, so like, don't need them. Thoughts? Is this a good idea? Should I pursue this biologically? No, okay. Front row shaking their heads because they think I shouldn't do pharmacological experiments on myself. Why not? My bones could be like huge, right?
Did they say that's a way for it to like get calcium things back into the bloodstream?
Yeah, okay, so that is a big problem. I'd like die. Okay, so that is a problem. Yeah, I gotta be able to have a calcium, like, I need calcium in my blood to stay alive, and I need to be able to keep it regulated, so I need to be able to pull it out as necessary. Okay, fine. That's fine. But maybe I could just crank them down a little bit. They can still respond to calcium, but nothing else. I still focus on this big bone concept. Okay, this class, I'm glad you're clever. This class is like, don't do it, right? There actually are people who are looking at ways to remodel bones, but, alright, here. These are bigger pictures for things. You don't want to just, point out, first of all, you need the calcium balance. You don't want osteoclasts to go too out of control. Like, that is a problem. You also don't want osteoblasts to go too out of control. In Paget, it's French or something, the G sounds weird. Paget's disease, I realize you're not physicians, but just looking at the picture, anything wrong here? It's an x-ray? Something's wrong, right? I realize the light's not great, but like, this is looking okay, right? It's kind of like dark white here. Here's something is going on here. In this condition, bones just are little osteoblasts, osteoclasts, just kind of go for the gusto. So, osteoblasts are forming bone matrix where they just probably don't need to. And it ends up with bones that are easy to break, right? It's a problem. But as a tissue type, and I realized the video talked about this, it comes into two types, right? This compact bone, that would be like here on the edge of the skull, right? You can see it nice and tough, tight. And it all pretty much looks the same. So like one little chunk of compact bone, another little chunk of compact bone, they look the same. Spongy bone has bunches of little like, it looks like a sponge, and it's not exactly identical, right? There's like a bigger hole here, a smaller hole here. It's a lot lighter. So this side of the class has convinced me that I shouldn't just like, grow bone wildly. But I'm still convinced that I need to somehow remodel my bones in different ways. Why not just make everything compact bone? My body knows how to make compact bone. Compact bone, like, this spongy thing doesn't look that strong. I can just fill this whole thing up with solid compact bone. My life would be better. I could hit bowling balls with my skull. Suggestions? don't hit bowling balls with your. Okay, yeah. Okay. Have you anybody played soccer? The first time you hit a soccer ball, that was a surprise to me because I had seen people play soccer, and like the way good soccer players do it, right? It looks like they're hitting a beach ball. Like, whew. First time I did, like, holy cow! I was not expecting that. Anyways, sorry. Um, Compact bone everywhere. I could have my arms too, legs.
It would make your bones a lot more dense and heavy.
Yeah, that's my plan.
How? I feel like that's probably the reason for why there's a bunch of faces.
Yeah, okay. You make a point, yeah.
Is it absorption?
So that too, but also how much do I weigh? My poor little muscles would be like, "Ugh,"
Okay.
right? Like honestly, there is a balance between you gotta be strong, and you also have to be able to move the thing, right? Are we okay with the idea? It's one of the many reasons you don't build cars out of bricks, right? Like that's fine, but like there are lighter materials that do really pretty well. Okay. Also, you don't have to shatter. So bones, um, yeah, they're really really hard, but they're not hard like glass. They're not super brittle. You don't want them to be super brittle. You want them to have some of that collagen. You want them to have some give, right? You don't want to say jump off a stool and have your legs shatter, right? There's got to be a little bit of give to it. So yes, okay. We'll stop doing biological ideas. But yeah, it's way, 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 way later. Let me just check I am recording. I get nervous. Yeah. I don't know if you caught in the video, but there's not. Okay, there's a fair bit of compact bone, but most bone is the spongy bone. But compact bone is taking up like 80% of how much this stuff weighs. It's heavy. It's very heavy. So when you don't have to have it be solid, you don't. Okay. I'm kind of jumping out. I'm trying to follow your textbook order, mostly. Got a little bit about tissues. We're going to look a little bit about types of bone, and then we look about how they grow. Bones are conveniently classified by shape, and your options are either long, short, flat, or miscellaneous. Miscellaneous is called irregular. This is also my classification of like drawers in my house. I'm like, whatever. Okay. We're okay with this concept. The kind that like skull and crossbones kind of like when you think of a bone, you have like this mental image of a dog pulling a bone. You're probably thinking of a long bone, where it's got. We'll talk about the terms later. Where it's got this like head here, where it's like got a bulge. It's long. It's got another bulge. Right, something long. There's some flat bones, right, like your sternum. Some short little bones, and then some like I don't know how to describe this particular shape. Long bones are going to be longer than they're wide, okay? But they still can be little guys. So there's not like a, well, it has to be 6 inches long or something. Long bones you like can have long bones in your finger, even though they're still fairly short. They can be longer than they are wide. With me there? Um, they're mostly compact bone, so they're pretty solid. Um, so like basically from here on, all the bones you have in your arm, with the exception of your wrist has some other funky ones, are all going to be long bones. Even the short little ones in your fingers. We're okay with this? It's that classic bone shape. Short bones are basically not. Everyone is in a cube, but they're about as wide as they are tall. They're kind of square-ish. Um, they're mostly spongy. They're mostly spongy inside. Um, your wrist is full of these type of bones, as are your ankles. Um, you also have one in your kneecap, and yeah, they're short. We're good? There's also flat bones. These ones are mostly flat. Typically they've got a slight curve to them. Your skull is probably the best example of this, right? You have a mental picture of the skull, right? Like it curves. It's not a long bone. It's not really a Q-shaped bone. But it's thin and flat, and it's kind of become a sandwich. You've got a layer of compact bone, and in the middle you have all the spongy bone, right? Um, Questions about this? And then irregular bones are ones you don't exactly have a good place to put them anywhere else. So like hip bones, they're not exactly a flat bone, right? Just based on the shape. They're definitely not a long bone. They're not a short bone. They're just kind of there. They're an irregular shape. We're good? Okay, I need everybody to keep their masks on. For reasons. Don't. Okay, I realize I'm recording this, but like, don't post this everywhere. I asked yesterday at our virtual faculty meeting, like, is there a number of like cases in the community or at William Woods that we shut down? Cause like, I want to know if I need to bring my potted plant home every night with me. And they're like, we'll keep you posted. What? I want a number. Anyways, sorry.
SCA, they told us it was just as many people as we can have in isolation where we can still provide for them. They don't give us a number.
Yeah, which I mean, I guess there is something said to that. They're like, basically, if all of the Tucker dining staff goes down, yeah, we're done. If it's like several, I mean, if some people who are online students, other places get sick, but they're still able to do life and stuff. Yeah, which is fair, I suppose. But okay, yes, thank you for wearing masks. I really, really appreciate this. All right, longbow. This is where we're gonna spend most of the rest of today. This beautiful picture. Just while we're looking at, we'll see this again later. This stuff right here, this, okay, leading questions. This like clear, glassy almost stuff, kind of slick on the very, very ends. Like if you pull apart a chicken bone and you see that slick stuff, is that bone or cartilage? And you don't need to know this yet, but it's cartilage. Yeah, get a picture for you. Come on, like back up here. Long bones where they connect, you can expect to see cartilage, which is really good because cartilage is amazing at reducing friction. Anybody here been in physics? Yeah, and you're forever doing those physics problems that are like, on a frictionless surface, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And normally friction is a thing wherever it is. Cartilage can cut down the friction dramatically. So as your bones move across one another, they can slide better. You can, like, as you're running, you're moving fast enough that if you just had bone on bone and we're still able to do this, this stuff would get hot enough to cook your muscles. Like it really would. There's a lot of friction there. So having this cartilage, also, sorry, I feel like I'm using creepy visuals. Not mean to use creepy visuals. Having cartilage there is going to prevent that, right? And also you're not going to grind bone on bone. You should not grind bone on bone. It hurts just to think about. Alright. Okay, so bones, nice long bones, here we are. The diaphysis is the tube part. It's the shaft. It's compact bone and it's hollow. So I've got compact bone here on the outside, and then there's other stuff in the middle. We'll see in a sec. The epiphyses, so epiphyses are plural. An epiphysis is the end of the bone. It's mostly spongy bone. You can see it up there. Mostly spongy bone here. Yeah? this part, epiphysis, this part, and you've got two of them on the long post. You've got an end on each side. So far, so good? Covering this, do you see how it's pulling back this, like, shiny kind of covering? You might have seen this, I don't know, I'm not sure how emotionally invested you are, like you're eating a chicken wing, how much you're, like, poking at the bone. But, you might have noticed there's like, kind of tough covering outside bone. Have you seen it before? Yeah. As most things in the human body, if you're not entirely sure what kind of stuff it is, connective tissue is a solid guess. This is connective tissue. It's called the periosteum. Right here, when you see ost, whatever, what should you think? Bone, right? Like osteoporosis, osteon, right? Periosteum is going to be the outside covering of this stuff. And it's tied on hard to the bone. It's got arteries in it, right? It's going to be supplying blood supply to the bone, and yeah, it's this covering. Finally, there's what's called articular cartilage. That's what I was getting excited about. Bones are called articulations when one bone touches the other bone. Right? They articulate with each other. They're connected to each other. I have no idea why speaking clearly and bones touching both have the same word. I'm sure there's some reason for this, but articulations are where they're connecting, and cartilage is going to be there. It's to decrease friction, and you'll see them at the epiphyses. All right. You don't really care about it along the shaft of the bone because you're not rubbing another bone up against it, right? So why bother? Okay, this part I think is kind of a cool way that things grow. Do you see this line right here? Looks different, right? You've got spongy bone up here, spongy bone down here. This is not the same, right? Do I have video? I thought I had video. What? I'm a video now or video later? Either way, fine. You're gonna see a video soon. I'm gonna go for video now because it's cool looking. We'll talk about this more later. But bones grow in a cool way. So bones grow like trees. And so okay, back with say the epidermis, right? When the epidermis is growing, you grow from the bottom layer, and scooches up, right? Bones are gonna grow differently, and you need to see this because it's cool.
Some have described the skeletal system as the infrastructure of the human body,
Again,
providing a rigid framework that offers protection and support, as well as attachment sites for the tendons and muscles that are essential for locomotion. The skeletal system is comprised of 206 bones, each of which is formed through a process known as ossification. Bone development and remodeling takes place on a continual basis from the prenatal period and early childhood through adulthood, as well as during the healing process that occurs following bone fractures. Ossification can take one of two forms depending on the type of bone that is forming. In the case of flat bones, like those of the ribs, scapula, pelvis, and skull, the ossification process is known as intramembranous ossification. The process is initiated by mesenchymal stem cells, which are cells that have yet to be differentiated into a particular cell type. Eventually, centrally located mesenchymal cells within the embryonic fibrous connective tissue differentiate into bone-forming cells or osteoblasts. This process constitutes the formation of what are called ossification centers. In the matrix formation phase that follows, the osteoblasts begin to lay down osteoid, which is the organic part of the bone, consisting of collagen fibers. Some of the osteoblasts are entrapped within the osteoid and are then said to be osteocytes. The osteoid then calcifies and forms slender, needle-like structures of spongy bone called spicules, which aggregate in the form of small supporting beams or trabeculae. Meanwhile, the blood vessels on the outside of the spongy bone condense and form the periosteum, the fibrous sheath that covers bone. As the trabeculae thicken, an interconnected network forms, resulting in what's called woven bone, which is characterized by a somewhat haphazard organization of collagen fibers and is mechanically weak. Eventually, this leads to the formation of lamellar bone around the newly formed spongy bone. This lamellar, or compact bone, has regular parallel alignment of collagen in the form of sheets, or lamellae, and is mechanically quite strong. While flat bones are formed through intramembranous ossification, most bones in the body, such as the long bones of the legs and arms, are formed in a somewhat different manner,
This is
known
the
as
interesting part.
endochondral ossification. This type of bone development involves cartilage models, which are eventually replaced with bony tissue. The process begins in the developing fetus and can be divided into several stages. Around the 8th week of development, chondroblasts begin secreting a cartilaginous matrix that will form the hyaline cartilage model for bone development. As with other hyaline cartilage tissues, chondrocytes are trapped in lacunae, and a perichondrium surrounds the model. The next stage begins when chondrocytes within the center of the model hypertrophy and begin to resorb some of the surrounding cartilage matrix. As these chondrocytes enlarge, the matrix begins to calcify, and chondrocytes begin to die, as nutrients cannot diffuse through the newly formed calcified matrix. Next, stem cells within the perichondrium divide to form osteoblasts, and a compact bone collar is formed around the calcified cartilage shaft. A periosteal bud, consisting of capillaries and osteoblasts, invades the core of the cartilaginous shaft, forming a primary ossification center. The remains of the calcified cartilage serve as a template on which osteoblasts can build bone. Bone development extends toward the epiphyses from the primary ossification center. Most primary ossification centers are formed by the 12th week of development. The same basic process of primary ossification is repeated in the epiphyses as secondary ossification centers are formed, replacing the calcified cartilage with mostly spongy bone. As the secondary ossification centers are formed, osteoclasts resorb bone within the diaphysis, creating a hollow medullary cavity. When secondary ossification is complete, the cartilage is totally replaced by bone, except in two places. A region of cartilage remains over the surface of the epiphyses as the articular cartilage, and another area of cartilage remains between the epiphyses and diaphysis. This is known as the growth region, or epiphyseal plate, and is the point from which all growth in bone length occurs. At adulthood, epiphyseal cartilage plates are completely ossified, and bone growth stops.
Okay. That was a long way to get to just growth plates. But they're kind of cool. There we go. So, that little line right there, if it's in a kid, this epiphyseal line or plate, it's still cartilage. If you've stopped growing tall, it's hardened for you. We'll see this more in a minute, but we're okay with the idea? If you're still growing, that's still cartilage there, and it becomes important. Bones have lots of sticky out bits, right? So we've got this long bone. If you're going to describe stuff on them, lots of sticky out parts. So there are going to be parts where muscles or tendons or ligaments can't attach. There are going to be holes for nerves and blood vessels, kind of small, but there are going to be passages for them. There's some really noticeable holes in bones where you can, let's say, like the spinal cord in or out, right? You want the spinal cord to be able to, be buddies with the brain. The skull is not solid all the way around. There's holes in it, right? If things stick out, they're called projections. They're also sometimes called processes, right? So something that sticks out. And if things go in, if there's like a dip in, it's called a cavity or a depression. That's a sticking bit. Okay? Just so we know terms now. This is what. Are we okay with terms? Throwing terms at you? Okay. This is what that video, which was long but okay, was trying to get at. Hyaline cartilage forms the skeleton from the get-go. So in the embryo, it forms the skeleton. As development takes place, this model you have of cartilage, which is pretty easy to put down this hyaline cartilage model. You then replace that with bone. Some places never get replaced, so nose, the ribs, your joints, that cartilage never got replaced by bone. If things go wrong in life, typically when you're very old, you can end up accidentally replacing some of that cartilage with bone, like say certain kinds of arthritis can calcify cartilage, which you want cartilage during development to be able to be calcified, right? But you don't want to get carried away. And then, so after birth, you might have noticed, infants come out about yay big, right? Which is still stunning to me, but they do, about yay big. They're going to get bigger. So their bones need to keep growing. They're already bones, but they need to get bigger. These epiphyseal plates let bones grow long ways during childhood. And what happens is new cartilage in that line, should I draw stuff? I'll just act out. New cartilage is going to grow. So you've got that line where there's cartilage. You can grow some new cartilage. Now there's more cartilage, right? It's longer. Some of the old cartilage gets chewed up, gets destroyed, and you've got a hollow spot, and then you replace that with bone. Does that make sense? So you've got cartilage, make some more, cut some out, put some bone in. You still have cartilage, but you have more bone now. You can just keep doing that, and you can ratchet the bone bigger. You can kind of imagine, well, it's more or less how trees grow, not the cartilage part, but you're growing from the ends. You're not growing like not like skin, where you're just growing and then losing the top layer. You're shifting out. Is that concept resolved with that? These epiphyseal plates are also, they've been called growth plates, right? If you're breaking your bones as a child, you want to try to avoid breaking these, right? Because you don't want to break and then get healed over a solid bone. You want to keep it cartilage until you're as tall as you're planning on being. Fair enough? Alright. So bones can get longer up until you stop getting taller. They also can get wider. So my terrible ideas aside, you do want bones to get stronger. This is called appositional growth. it means getting them whiter. And this is done in response to two factors. So, your blood calcium level makes a huge difference on this. Question: if my blood calcium level is high, am I going to build bone or break down bone? I mean, you're doing both all the time, but in general. Better question: if my blood calcium level's low, breaking down bone, building a bone. Breaking down, right? Like, bones are important, but blood calcium is higher on our list of concerns. If you've got plenty of blood calcium, sure, now is a great time to build some bones. Alright? So that's going to influence whether you can have appositional growth, whether you can build these bones back up big. And also, how much the bones are being stressed influences how much they're going to be remodeled as well. Basically, weight-bearing exercise increases bone density because as you start to push hard on your bones respond by laying down more bone. Fair enough? Yeah, build strong, healthy bones. Questions? This is mostly, again, for online people. These are the pictures talking through what the video just showed, right? During development, you replace a whole bunch of cartilage with bone. You got blood vessels in it, you hollow out the inside parts. As they're growing along with, they also can grow in width, right? And in a child, you still see a bunch of these, this epithelial plate, you still see a bunch of cartilage. It's going to keep growing, and then eventually you can solidify this down in adulthood. You're not expecting that to keep growing, but you can still remodel the edges. You can add bone, you can resorb bone, depending on how you're using this bone, right? Like, there are all sorts of calculations for this. If you're doing the same motion over and over and over, your bone's going to respond to that. You can tell, I can't. People who are good at this can tell if someone's right or left-handed based on bone density, right? Because the one you're using more is going to get stronger or bigger. Fair enough? Alright. So that's the overall picture of big bones. We've classified them in several different types. We're going to now start looking closer in at what they actually look like up close. Alright? So you've got a chunk of compact bone here, and there's some spongy bone on this side. See these tubes? Almost look like tree rings? Those are called osteons. Well, the whole thing. These are going to be packed really, really tightly together. Jam-packed as in compact bone, smushed as close as you can together. They do have going through them blood vessels, right? And this stuff is interesting. So as you go down deeper, you'll see little holes inside it that are going to have osteocytes, so they trap some cells in there. They're going to do lots of things, but one of the things they're doing is they're noticing if this bone gets stressed, right? As you put pressure on the bone, they'll notice this is going to help encourage more bone growth there. And they're arranged again in this tree ring-like pattern with these rings around the central canal. All right. And then you have these little tiny canals, like right here. They're going to form a transportation system, and bone cells get to be connected, which is interesting. Bone tissue is a tissue. It gets to talk to each other. Like other tissues, it's not dead. Okay? It's calcified, yeah. But there still is communication amongst it. We're good with this picture then? We've got this osteon, right? This whole big unit, lots of them are packed together. You've got this little lacuna, which is basically a pocket where you can put a cell in conveniently. These are all connected, and we have some compact bone here. Yeah? Great. Questions about this? I feel like last year I spent probably half an hour talking about this, but I don't think anybody cared. Is everybody feeling comfortable with this? Jake says we're good. We're good. Okay, moving on. Anything wrong with this picture? Yeah, you're like, haha. Who here is going to med school at some point in their lives? Well, who here is going to some health profession at some point in their lives? Okay, gotcha, that's the picture. Yeah, you might be doing it, but you can realize, you know what, I don't think it's supposed to do that. Bones break. Alright? Typically that's a bad thing, right? But it's not the most terrible thing. So, you might be aware that, like, new cars, and it's cool, it's a good thing, new cars are designed to crumple in a certain way, right? So, like, if you get in a car crash, the front of the car is designed to crumple and take a lot of the impact, but protect the part that has you in it, okay? Bones are really strong, and they're fairly flexible. They're also convenient in that if they break, they do break in such a way that kind of helps you out. So, again, I'm not recommending any of these. And Katie especially, I feel like I'm using creepy imagery, I'm sorry. Okay. But like if people say jump out of a burning building or something, and they land on their legs, they might kind of mess up their legs and things, bones, but the crumple protects a lot of the viscera. We okay with that? It's a rough way to get done, but it does absorb a lot of force. But yeah, and bones can grow back. They're actually really pretty good at this. So, bone breaks come in lots of different versions. You can have a break that just is a break that doesn't come out of the skin. It's called a simple fracture. Compound fracture, you're expecting bone to come out of the skin, and that's rough. Typically, the way it's slightly more complicated than this, but basically, what you're trying to do if the bone breaks, medical professionals are trying to put it back together and leave it still, and just let the bone do its thing and grow back. What you don't want to happen is you don't want to have the bone break and then put it back together wrong, and then have the bone grow together wrong. That can happen, right? You want it to be back to where it was supposed to be. Fair enough? This is just for your information. There are lots of different types of this. Some are better than others. Like a green stick break, the bone breaks, but it's not all the way broken. That's easier to handle than something like the bone got twisted. That's bad news, because then it got broken on a lot of planes. Some of them just make me hurt just thinking about them. If the bone gets smushed, the crumple idea, this depressed bone, that's tricky. Crushed is also bad. And then lots of little fragments is also kind of scary. So moving on, because it makes me concerned. We're good? Okay. Briefly, we're going to go with just like a standard break that nothing funky has happened to. They're going to get repaired kind of similarly to how we saw like connective tissue get repaired, right? They're like, okay, first we're going to stop the bad thing from happening, and then we're going to try and just fix it, which is, I realize, overly basic. First, there's going to be a hematoma. So we see there's this bone, we're looking at a long bone, there's a break, right here. There's going to be a hematoma. Anybody have a guess what this heme part means? blood, right? Okay, so hematoma, we've got this blood going through here, right? Blood's really helpful if you're trying to grow stuff back. It's got nutrients, it's got oxygen, it's got all sorts of immune system cells that will happily help out, right? Then, so after this hematoma, a bunch of fibrocartilage gets laid down. But I have a question, and I like this question enough that I actually made note of it here. Who cares about cartilage? The stuff's broken. Why don't you just dump calcium salts on it? Dump this hard, solid part of the bone back on this stuff. You have a break. Basically, right here it says, oh, what happens is you're going to put fibers through it. Why don't you just basically throw the equivalent of plaster at it and just, glue this stuff back together?
Maybe like super dense in the one area versus like be normal again.
Yeah. And if it ever cracks again, where is it going to crack?
It's gonna crack it stuff.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to fix something this way? Something breaks and you're like, I'm sure just a little bit of glue. Basically, it's the difference between if you've got a board and you've broken it, gluing the edges together versus putting another board behind it and like screwing it in, right? If you've got fibers, if you've got some connective thing between both of them, that's gonna last better than just plaster, just gluing it together. So first you're gonna run this fibrocartilage through it. It's gonna make it supporting. It's also bone doesn't really know very well how to just handle growth on its own. It's from development. The way it does this is it looks for cartilage that's supposed to replace. So if you run fibrocartilage through it, it's going to help connect it, and now things are more back to normal. You still shouldn't be like bowling using this. I'm assuming this is an arm bone. You shouldn't be putting a lot of pressure on it, but it's connected again, so that's good. Got fibrocartilage, and now bone knows how to look at cartilage, replace it with bone. So that's what's going to happen. You've got spongy bone first. Just going to start with spongy bone. And then after a while, this can get chewed back down, and this spongy bone can get replaced with compact bone, and you're back to normal now. We've got compact bone on the outside. We've got blood vessels flowing through everything. We've got a little bit of spongy bone here in the middle, but mostly it's compact bone, and things are good. We're solid? Questions? Great. That's 15 minutes before class is supposed to end, so go do your quiz. Now we're done. Concerns, comments? Great. Have a one. Ah! My computer just died. I really hope it's not recording. Stop.